Hello everyone, Brad Drak-V here from the PDH Pod to tell you about 3 unknown, underrated, or unexplored uncommon creatures from throughout the history of Magic the Gathering. In this episode, I'll be picking creatures from Commander Legends The Battle for Baldur's Gate to build around for your next, or first, Pauper Commander deck. CLB has been heralded as a master set for Pauper formats because it was full of uncommon creatures, powerful commons, and the wildly busted initiative mechanic. Some of these creatures even saw the banhammer in our 60-card Pauper cousin. Let's start it off with an unknown. Githzerai Monk is a 5-mana mono-white 3/2 Gith Monk with flash and flying and psychic defense. When Githzerai Monk enters the battlefield, tap all creatures you don't control. As they are known to do, this monk lives in isolation, largely unknown by the community, hiding in the shadows of all the absolute powerhouses we got for commanders and background pairings from Baldur's Gate. As far as the archetype, I think Githzerai wants to play some sort of fun police / pillow fort style game while you're loaded up on all the white flicker effects to blink every combat step on your opponent's turns. Then, when the time is right, you're getting in big damage with your own virtually unblockable army. For the shell, I mentioned all the white flickers, which means you're going to want Ephemerate, the 2 shifts, both Cloud and Scroll, Flicker of Fate, and all their best friends. Being mono-white allows you to take this deck in a few different directions, either a white weenie style deck with cheap value creatures like Spirited Companion and Inspiring Overseer, paired with Anthem and Anthem creatures, or just big value ETB creatures like Palace Sentinels and Goliath Paladin. Maybe a mix of both? Holding the Monarchy or Initiative should be pretty easy as long as you can keep the Monk alive, but that shouldn't be too difficult though, because White offers plenty of ways to protect it while also keeping your opponents from attacking you. The verdict here, this deck will be slow. Very, very slow, and probably somewhat annoying. 5 mana is a lot to hold up while you're trying to keep the Monk alive. This is, however, the type of commander that can take a pod by surprise and even steal a couple games. You're going to have to be in the right mood to play a Githzerai Monk deck. Now we'll talk about an underrated commander. Giant Ankheg is an 8-mana 8/8 insect with trample and ward 2, and it says other creatures you control have trample and ward 2. We've seen a few decks for this giant insect floating around, but I feel the loaded text box here makes this perfectly underrated as a big stompy commander. Green beaters often suffer from targeted removal, but slapping ward 2 on each of them can really cause problems for the table, especially for aggro decks. For the archetype, Ankheg is a very straightforward commander that wants you to play all the green beefy boys in a nice and tight stompy list. For the shell, we have 1.5 million supporting options here, but I'm interested in trampling effects like Rancor and Setessence Training, anthems like You Meet at a Tavern, +1 counters with Master Chefs paired with all the bodies that give trample to your modified creatures. Mono green always suffers from the lack of card draw, so you're going to need things like Owlbear, Serulf's Packmate, and Llanowar Visionary. Provoke is a mono green juicer that has been largely slept on by the community, and that is a crime. Now, 8 mana is a ton even for mono green, so all the ramp spells will need to find their way into this list. This deck may take a few turns to set up, but having ward across the board, hey, that rhymes, that means you'll have a bit more time than normal to amass your giant green army. My verdict, Giant Ankheg seems like a fun, albeit linear stompy deck that could be built in such a way that you can swap it out for literally any other mono green commander if you ever get tired of this big bug. I have found that mono green is very flexible in regards to the commander slot, and this deck seems to be no different. Lastly, I feel like this one is widely unexplored. Safana Kalimport Cutthroat, paired with the background of Dungeon Delver. Safana is a mono-black 3-mana 3/2 human rogue with menace. It says at the beginning of your end step, if you have the initiative, create a treasure token. Create 3 of those tokens instead if you've completed a dungeon. Choose a background, and we're going to choose Dungeon Delver, a 2-mana legendary background that says commander creatures you own have room abilities of dungeons you own, trigger an additional time. A quick search will grant you no shortage of lists for this background commander, but I've noticed that a lot of people tend to give up on the deck after a couple games or never even get past the theorizing stage of building it, myself included. For the archetype, if you love the Undercity and dungeons, and I mean love them like I do, but you don't want to completely and thoroughly Rilsa people out of the game, Safana Delver is a perfectly suitable option. Being in the same colors as Rilsa means you can almost make a direct swap in the command zone and lower your threat level by 50% or more. The shell here is going to be mostly the same as the aforementioned Kingpin, but since Safana herself doesn't grant you the initiative, you'll probably want to slot in more flicker effects to target your Aarakocra sneaks and Trailblazer's torches. And since Dungeon Delver and Safana both care about all dungeons, not just the Undercity, you can get away with finding room for the generic dungeon and venture effects from Adventures in the Forgotten Realms. Secret Door is one of my favorites. Shh. If you've played with or against the initiative more than one time, you'll know that the threat you present by triggering every room an additional time means that your opponents will be constantly gunning for you. But getting it back should be easy with a nice suite of flying creatures or unblockable ones like Changeling Outcast, Tormented Soul, and Passwall Adept type effects. My verdict, Safana Delver is absolutely not Rilsa. She is not Rilsa. One more time, say it with me. Safana is not Rilsa, but she does make for a more fun, interesting, and casual way to play with dungeons without pulverizing the hopes and dreams of your entire playgroup. I mean, unless that's your thing. I think that covers it for Pauper Commanders from Commander Legends: The Battle for Baldur's Gate. If you've built any of these commanders, comment below. I want to see how they turned out for you. Check the links in the description below for more details. Thanks for hanging out until the end, and until next time, brew a deck, play some PDH, and I'll talk to you soon. Peace.